2. The sins of others work for good to the godly, as they set them the more a praying against sin. If there were not such a spirit of wickedness abroad, perhaps there would not be such a spirit of prayer. Crying sins cause crying prayers. The people of God pray against the iniquity of the times, that God will give a check to sin, that he will put sin to the blush. If they cannot pray down sin, they pray against it, and this God takes kindly. These prayers shall both be recorded and rewarded. Though we do not prevail in prayer, we shall not lose our prayers. My prayer returned into my own bosom. Psalm 35, verse 13. 3. The sins of others work for good, as they make us the more in love with grace. The sins of others are a foil to set off the luster of grace the more. One contrary sets off another. Deformity sets off beauty. The sins of the wicked do much disfigure them. Pride is a disfiguring sin. Now, the beholding another's pride makes us the more in love with humility. Malice is a disfiguring sin. It is the devil's picture. The more of this we see in others, the more we love meekness and charity. Drunkenness is a disfiguring sin. It turns men into beasts. It deprives of the use of reason. The more intemperate we see others, the more we must love sobriety. The black face of sin sets off the beauty of holiness so much the more. 4. The sins of others work for good, as they work in us the stronger opposition against sin. The wicked have broken your law, therefore I love your commandments. Psalm 119, verses 126 and 127. David would never have loved God's law so much if the wicked had not set themselves so much against it. The more violent others are against the truth, the more valiant the saints are for it. Living fish swim against the stream. Just so, the more the tide of sin comes in, the more the godly swim against it. The impieties of the times provoke holy passions in the saints. That anger is without sin, which is against sin. The sins of others are as a whetstone to set the sharper edge upon us. They whet our zeal and indignation against sin the more. 5. The sins of others work for good, as they make us more earnest in working out our salvation. When we see wicked men take such pains for hell, this makes us more industrious for heaven. The wicked have nothing to encourage them, yet they sin. They venture shame and disgrace. They break through all opposition. Scripture is against them, and conscience is against them. There is a flaming sword in the way, yet they sin. Godly hearts, seeing the wicked thus mad for the forbidden fruit, and wearing out themselves in the devil's service, are the more emboldened and quickened in the ways of God. They will take heaven, as it were, by storm. The wicked are like camels running after sin. And do we creep like snails in piety? Shall impure sinners do the devil more service than we do Christ? Shall they make more haste to go to the prison of hell than we do to the kingdom of heaven? Are they never weary of sinning, and are we weary of praying? Have we not a better master than they? Are not the paths of virtue pleasant? Is not there joy in the way of duty, and heaven at the end? The activity of the sons of Belial in sin, this is a spur to the godly, to make them mend their pace, and run the faster to heaven. 6. The sins of others work for good, as they are looking glasses in which we may see our own hearts. Do we see a heinous, impious wretch? Behold a picture of our own hearts. Such would we be if God left us. What is in the wicked men's practice is in our nature. Sin in the wicked is like fire which flames and blazes forth. Sin in the godly is like fire in the embers. Christian, though you do not break forth into a flame of scandalous sin, yet you have no cause to boast, for there is much sin in the embers of your nature. You have the root of all sin in you, and would bear as hellish fruit as any ungodly wretch, if God did not either curb you by his power or change you by his grace. 7. The sins of others work for good, as they are the means of making the people of God more thankful. When you see another infected with the plague, how thankful are you that God has preserved you from it? It is a good use that may be made of the sins of others to make us more thankful. Why might not God have left us to the same excess of wickedness? Think with yourself, O Christian, why should God be more merciful to you than to another? Why should he snatch you as brand plucked out of the fire, and not him? How may this make you to adore free grace? What the Pharisee said boastingly, we may say thankfully, God, I thank you that I am not like other men, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, etc. Luke 18, verse 11. If we are not as wicked as others, we should adore the riches of free grace. Every time we see men hastening on in sin, we are to thank God that we are not such. If we see an insane person, we thank God that it is not so with us. Much more, when we see others under the power of Satan, how thankful we should be that this is no longer our condition. For we too were once foolish, disobedient, deceived, captives of various passions and pleasures, living in malice and envy, hateful, detesting one another. Titus 3, verse 3. 8. The sins of others work for good, as they are means of making God's people better. Christian, God can make you a gainer by another's sin. The more unholy others are, the more holy you should be. The more a wicked man gives himself to sin, the more a godly man gives himself to prayer. But I give myself to prayer. Psalm 109, verse 4. 9. The sins of others work for good, as they give an occasion to us of doing good. Were there no sinners, we could not be in such a capacity for service. The godly are often the means of converting the wicked. Their prudent advice and pious example is a lure and a bait to draw sinners to the embracing of the gospel. The disease of the patient works for the good of the physician. By healing the patient, the physician enriches himself. Just so, by converting sinners from the error of their way, our crown comes to be enlarged. Those who turn many to righteousness shall shine as the stars forever and ever. Daniel 12, verse 31. Not as lamps or candles, but as the stars forever. Thus we see the sins of others are overruled for our good. Secondly, the sense of their own sinfulness will be overruled for the good of the godly. Thus, our own sins shall work for good. This must be understood carefully. When I say the sins of the godly work for good, not that there is the least good in sin. Sin is like poison which corrupts the blood and infects the heart, and without a sovereign antidote, sin always brings death. Such is the venomous nature of sin. It is deadly and damning. Sin is worse than hell, but yet God, by his mighty, overruling power, makes sin in the outcome turn to the good of his people. Hence that golden saying of Augustine, God would never permit evil if he could not bring good out of evil.